Hello and welcome back to Fifth Period, the podcast hosted by two media teachers where each week we take a different film and talk through the highs, lows and everything in between. I'm Mr. Brown and with me is co-host
Mr. Whittle. Hello everyone, welcome back to Fifth Period. Very excited to be here, maybe mixed emotions about being here, but we'll get into that.
Yes, I do usually introduce the podcast by labeling us as a film appreciation podcast, but I was very selective with my word choice today because let's be honest, the truth is you can't always appreciate every single film out there, and while there may be things to appreciate about every film, they're not all ranking at the top of our list.
When you came to me with the idea to do this podcast, I think we actually discussed it at the time, where it's nice to have the films chosen for us, so we're not going to be in a position where we are just talking about films that we know we're going to like. Like, we are going to be challenged with films because they're selected by the students. So just to be clear, with Film Appreciation Club, the students are picking the films that we watch on a weekly basis. And what we love about that is that it's giving the students an opportunity to show us something that they like. Maybe they're showing other students what they like as well. But that doesn't mean that we're going to always like the film, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing I really want to say right at the top of today's recording is that just because we don't like it doesn't mean it's not a good film.
There is no such thing as an objectively bad film. Would you agree?
100%. And everybody has different preferences. Yeah. You could label certain films as, well, I would think that most people would at least be able to appreciate something about a film, but depending on your preference for genre, the types of characters you like coming up, different kind of stylistic qualities about a film, I mean, it's always gonna change your opinion on it.
And I reckon if someone had been in the room for every conversation you and I have had about different films, more often than not, you and I would disagree about whether a film is good or bad in our view and our opinion. Mr. Brown and I don't always see eye to eye on films. Sometimes we agree and think that we both think that they're great, but I would say more often than not we have differing views on films.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And I mean, it's all going to be based on what students pick for Film Club, but I would love it if down the track a film does come up where one of us feels really strongly positive towards it and one feels quite negative towards it, and just to hear that back and forth, because sometimes I go into a film and I don't have a whole lot of appreciation for it, but I have a conversation with someone and they sort of describe something that I've missed in the film, and it actually makes me kind of see it in a whole new light. So yeah, I find that aspect of film and how different people see things as a really interesting quality.
Yeah, so the point with you and I maybe not always agreeing on what our viewers are on a film is that with the students putting forward a film as well, if we don't necessarily like it, but they do, that's okay. That's the beauty of any form of art appreciation, including film, yeah?
Yeah. And so, the mystery film, I mean, it's no mystery. You've seen it in the thumbnail, you've seen it in the title, but the film that we were looking at for this week was Top Gun, the original Top Gun, not the new film.
Yes, so 1986, we revisit that by our third podcast. So our first one being with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, another film from 1986. This one very different to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There is some comedic elements in this one, but maybe not intentionally. Maybe I'm going too quickly into the
I don't know. Honestly, I think there are definitely moments that are supposed to be funny, but I'm not sure if the moments I found funny were necessarily the ones that were intended to be funny.
Yeah, for sure.
And look, I think it's quite controversial too that we're not necessarily the biggest fans of this particular film. I know it has a huge following, and as we said, just because we don't like it doesn't mean it's not appreciated by a lot of people. I think that just because we're going to be talking about some aspects today that we didn't particularly like doesn't mean that it wasn't a really strong choice for Film Club. We had lots of people there again this week, and lots of people really appreciating the film. So I'm eager to get into it, but I really wanted to clarify that up front because I don't want to dismiss anyone's choices for Film Club, and I think a film that we're talking about that's not necessarily one of our favourites is still a really, really valid choice, and I think we'll get to be able to discuss some really interesting things today.
Yeah, absolutely, and like certainly when we criticise a film for its pros and cons, that's not a criticism on any individual and their individual taste. Putting that out there, like I actually feel like I've got a vague memory where if you were to ask a younger version of Mr. Whittle whether he liked this film, he would say yes. I loosely remember enjoying it when I was of a certain age. So going into it now, I was a bit unsure as to what I would think about the film. I kind of assumed that I'd be a bit more critical on it because I am who I am now, but the view I came out with was much more definitive than the one I went in with. Yes.
Yeah, well, and if you were to ask a younger Mr. Brown what he thought of it as a kid, he would say, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And so this is probably one of the biggest aspects of how I watched the film. Look, I'll be honest, I was going into it with some strong feelings already. I was trying not to be overly critical from the get-go. I had seen aspects of the film before, but I'd never seen the entire thing in a row. So I'd seen individual scenes from it. I had pretty much pieced together the film, but I'd never watched it in the full sequence and watched how it all plays out. And so going in, I was thinking, look, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of what I've seen, but I'm hoping that by watching the film as a whole and seeing the order of events and seeing it all play out, it will be a lot more cohesive and it will feel better. Like it will come together a lot clearer than my understanding of the film. And I have to say, it probably had the opposite effect.
So for someone who hasn't seen the film, like you said, and then obviously sat through it just yesterday, right?
Yep, that's it.
The opening of it before we see any kind of visual, the opening credits for me scream 80s. The font, the typography, like from the first thing we see, which is just like the opening, like the black screen with some titles on it. I'm like, they couldn't have chosen a font that in 35 years later is going to scream 80s action than what we see in that opening, those opening credits. And then obviously sequences into random footage on the jet launcher pad thing. Yeah, that's the technical term. I think, is that right?
Yeah, well, we're jet aficionados, so we're going to be using all of the technical terms throughout today's podcast.
Yes. But yeah, like I feel like that opening sequence where it's the jets taking off, very much setting the scene of where the whole movie's going to be kind of focused on, with this action-packed kind of military vibe. It really sets a tone from like the first minute.
Yeah, and look, the thing that instantly grabbed me, I have to say some positives right from the get-go, because I fear there may not be too many of those.
Well, I feel like if we're talking about the first few minutes of before we're seeing the cockpit scenes.
Yep.
Because I know that we've got some critiques come up about the cockpit
already,
scenes.
But when the score comes in.
Yes.
Instantly. I mean, the music in the film... There's both a pro and a con to this. The music in the film is awesome. And I don't necessarily know that, again, that's all really subjective, but for me, I really appreciated it. I thought it was very, very catchy. I thought it worked to what they were doing. It was, as we said, it was very representative of the time that the film was released, but still really catchy, and it got you geared up. And in a film that I didn't think I'd be too excited about, those sorts of sequences, the music was a really strong selling point for me. But I will come back to music a little bit later on, because I've got some interesting notes on that.
This might be a good opportunity to distinguish for our technical listeners the difference between score and just songs, because the film does feature both, right? So you're talking about those opening sequences where it's kind of got that epic building music, and then it's kind of like until the jets launch, and then when the jets launch, we enter the danger zone.
Oh, yeah, we do.
So we shift from score to song, and Kenny Loggins must have absolutely adored this film because it really launched his career, because he has the Danger Zone song, but he also then has the song while they're doing the volleyball scene. Like, you know, so there's a couple of songs with the same artist through it, and so yeah, and this was very much an 80s and 90s thing to do, where you'd get a few key artists and then you make an accompanying soundtrack that it's going to be a separate thing to be able to sell. So Danger Zone was a massive hit for this film, and yeah, they started the film strongly by putting us into the danger zone as the jets enter the sky.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of people, even if they hadn't seen the film, know that song is synonymous with the film.
Yes.
So we did forget to mention that we will be going into some pretty specific detail about the film. We may be revealing some big plot points, so important that we do put a spoiler warning.
We have already spoiled the fact that there's jets in the film. Sorry, guys. Yes.
I know. Yeah. That is a big reveal. Apologies for the people who have ruined it for. But yes, if any dramatic plot points happen, we will probably be going over those. So if you haven't seen the film and you want to stay up to date with us, please go and check it out first, and then come on back and hear our very flattering thoughts on it.
So I guess this now starts introducing us to some characters in the sky, right? There's actually sections throughout the film, and we're going to talk about the first one now, and maybe break it open a bit. But there's key sections through the film where there's sequences of them in flight and action scenes of them in flight. I think there's 3 or 4, and they end up making up a good portion, like a third of the film's total running time, where we have these sequences in the sky. But I had spoiler in a sense that Mr. Brown and I have talked about this in advance when straight after Film Club on Friday, where there was a particular part about the sequences in the sky that was a bit. Yeah, so the first time we see the characters sort of in their cockpits, they are just sort of swaying from side to side, and it's very, very annoying. I mean, I haven't seen Top Gun Maverick. I'm not sure whether they've made a significant improvement on how they've shot those scenes. Based on what I've heard from people, it certainly sounds like they have. And so it was very strange. They're obviously trying to emphasize the fact that they are constantly moving and that they're swiveling back and forth, but it's just sort of, in the opening, it's very much a gentle rock back and forth. The realism's not quite there for a modern audience, right?
No, and I'm not sure, I'm being very critical of it, but I'm not sure what I would have preferred to see, because later on when we do see more intense sequences in the cockpit, it does kind of look like the Blair Witch Project has been shot in the cockpit. And the camera's just shaking uncontrollably, and heads are flipping back and forth, and so it is hard to say, I don't like what they did there, but also not have a substitute for what I would like. So based on the fact that people have said they've significantly improved that for the sequel, maybe that's something I should check out and see how they've done it better than they've done in this version.
Watch your space, people. Mr. Brown is saying he may go and watch the Top Gun Maverick sequel. I don't think that's actually ever going to happen.
Heavy emphasis on may there, guys. I'm open to it, but we'll see what happens.
So we meet a bunch of characters in the sky, and they all happen to have these, what do they call them, flight names? So we know, we do learn real names of characters along the way, but we really refer to them with their flight names. And those flight names are just cheeseball city for me.
Oh, ridiculous. I honestly, it's like they pick 2 random objects and just put them together. You open your fridge, you pick something out of your fridge, and that's the name.
Interesting.
Cheeseball.
That you'd say random. See, I think that they are really kind of on the nose, the way that they've got this whole thing in there. But I do think there's kind of symbolism to the names that they've selected. So Maverick, which is Tom Cruise's character's flight name, or they had a name for the names, but anyway. Then Goose and Iceman. If you look at those 3 being our main ones, they have connotations within those names of the kind of characters that they're going to be. Maverick and Tom Cruise in general being this lovable rebel of a character, so much of an 80s archetype as well. Like, you know, we're going to love him even though he does the wrong thing, kind of.
Yeah. Or you're meant to love him. Who knows if you actually do. But I see what you're saying. Goose, obviously, he's the quirky character. He's a little bit fun. He's a little bit crazy.
Yep.
Iceman is closed off from the world. So there is definitely symbolism there. And I think that while it is on the nose, I actually think one thing that the code names have going for them, not code names, but when you are in those crazy scenes where they are in their jets, they're printed in bold letters on their helmets, which is just a narrative device so that you can keep track of, oh, who's that? He's wearing the same mask and helmet that someone else is wearing. Oh, it says Maverick. It's Tom Cruise. We're good. We're on board.
I know we don't want to make this podcast also just half of it being about Top Gun Maverick, but I will point out that I tried to watch Top Gun Maverick and got half an hour into it. And a big reason why I bowed out of it is because they doubled down on the flight names, and there's like 25 different flight name characters you have to remember with, like I may be exaggerating with the 25, but they just give you this raft of character names, and I'm like, it sounds like a cartoon show. Like, you know, it's like,
I'm just looking around the room. It's keyboard. Is that one of their code names?
Keyboard. Are you helping out tissues? Yeah. So I didn't enjoy Top Gun Maverick to the point where I didn't even finish the film. But yeah, this plot device that they have with the character names is not for me. I did not enjoy having to refer to the main character as Maverick or Mav.
Well, not even that, but that the code names. That's what we've locked in now. We can't think of what they're actually called. Code names is what we're going with. That they're not exclusive to when they're flying.
Yeah.
In their day-to-day life, even in like really intimate scenes between friends or romantic partners, it's like they refer to them by these code names. It's so ridiculous.
So we obviously have the flight sequence, and then we get down on the ground after that, and we have, I forget what the character's name is that bows out, and so we have Strickland, who then sends Maverick and Goose off to Top Gun reluctantly because they are the rebellious two.
Yeah, and again, that was something I liked. The characters almost having anxiety attacks while they're flying, and bringing in very early the idea that anything could go wrong at any time, and emphasizing the danger of that up front. I think that's probably my favorite part of the film. Well, the fact that it does kind of humanize those characters
exactly.
a little bit.
Like I hadn't really picked up on that, but now that you pointed out, it's probably the most humanizing factor of the story, right? Where you know they're flawed in a manner. You know, they are human.
I think Cougar was the character's name.
Cougar, okay.
Or that was his call sign.
I'll run with it. Yeah. Cougar, yeah, sure. So then, we have Cruise and the guy who plays Goose, who's the guy from ER.
Yep.
Did you pick up on that?
I recognized him, and I will admit I had to look it up on Google, but I was like, of course. But he's significantly less hair in ER.
Yes. They head off to Top Gun Academy.
Yes, and that kind of sets the tone for, you did something wrong, I'm going to reward you.
I'm glad you're picking up. Let's talk about it early on.
Yeah.
A big reason I hate this film is because the whole thing is about, if you are someone who does the wrong thing, you still get rewarded.
Yeah, the weird thing is the entire film is littered with consequences for Tom Cruise's character doing the wrong thing. And he continually does the wrong thing over and over again.
Yep.
He's like, I stuffed up. I won't do that again. And then he immediately does it again.
I'm happy to jump into this a bit more. Halfway through the film, I wrote the notes. At halfway point, the film has said nothing in terms of character development and anything besides reverence for someone who is not a likable character, for me at least. So, I'm sure many people like Tom Cruise's character, but for me, I didn't like him, and he didn't become someone I liked. Towards the end of the film, there's no one learns a lesson. There's no redeeming quality to Tom Cruise's character.
And the film thinks that it's showing that. That was one of my biggest kind of pet peeves with it. It's that the whole time it feels like it's trying to put a message forward that it never actually achieves. So like, look at this lesson he's learned. What lesson? He hasn't learnt anything.
Like the whole, like even at the start when we meet Val Kilmer's character, and he says something about not liking Cruz because he's unsafe and he's reckless and dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm like, so, and we're meant to not like Val Kilmer. He's meant to be the kind of the antagonistic character. And it's like, no, I agree with Val.
100%.
I agree with Iceman.
And anyone that calls out Tom Cruise for being reckless, you're supposed to be like, oh, I hate that guy.
Yeah.
But that's a very valid thing when you've got life and death situations and you're screwing around. That's valid to call someone out on that.
He's putting the Val in valid.
Yeah, he is. I've got noted here, and I bring it up early because it doesn't kind of neatly fall into the plot. My notes are sort of divided into different sections for this film, and one entire section is the relationship between Maverick and Charlie.
Right.
So it's ridiculous.
I've got a few notes on it myself. Feel free to dive in.
Let's jump into the first scene that they meet, the singing scene.
Yes.
The infamous singing scene.
It is iconic to some, infamous to others, but we all know what we're talking about.
Just awful.
Awful.
I hate this sequence. You can tell, and I don't know if she's supposed to be acting this way or if this is just the actress kind of slipping through, but you can tell she feels really awkward in the scene where they are singing to her. Everyone else joins in, and eventually she just says, all right, take a seat. And they're all like, yay, we did it.
Yeah.
But she only says take a seat to make it stop, surely.
I mean, we, the audience, are meant to feel charisma from Cruz for what he's doing, and Charlie is also meant to be enticed by his moves, right? But you're talking about Charlie kind of feigning that enticement, and I don't even feel it at all. Like I am not sold on Cruz is lovable at this point.
If you did this in real life, there is no way anyone would want to. You'd get kicked out of the bar for disturbing the woman that's just trying to have a nice night by herself. But the biggest comparison that I found between this scene was if you look at a film like 10 Things I Hate About You, and Heath Ledger gets up and he does the big romantic gesture. Obviously, a romantic gesture in general is very subjective. If you want the gesture, then it's received very well. If you don't like the person, then obviously it's received very poorly. But there is a huge difference between that scene where he sings to her from the bandstand and he's embarrassing himself, he's isolated, and she's in a big group. She's not really being singled out all that much. In this sequence, all of the guys in the bar crowd around her. She's by herself. She feels really awkward while they all sing. So Tom Cruise isn't really embarrassing himself because everyone around is joining in. So it's a very different sort of a gesture between the two films.
Absolutely. And in terms of considering what position Charlie's in, the pressure she's feeling to comply. Like, imagine she turned around and said, no, piss off, I'm trying to have a drink. So that exemplifies how the film is rife with machismo. Like, it's just like, I just like, so, that whole kind of macho-esque vibe of, we're going to do this and we're going to win because we're men.
Yeah. That is exactly right. And then she shuts him down after she accepts him. You're like, oh, why would she say yes to that? And then she shuts him down. You go, oh, great. She's done it. She shut him down. And then he immediately follows her into the bathroom.
Yep.
This is the guy we're supposed to like.
Yep.
And he stalks her into the bathroom. Very upsetting.
Now, so that's just one scene in a few scenes that really stand out to me are the dynamics between Cruz, Maverick, and what's her name? Charlie.
Charlie, yes.
Another one that stands out is when she chases him after he has cracked the sads because she didn't agree that his moves were cool. Is that what it was?
Well, okay, so that happens significantly later in the film.
Yeah.
But the entire relationship between them, they spend one scene with one of them chasing them, and then the next scene with the other one chasing them. So even after the bar sequence we just discussed, she shuts him down completely. The next day, she finds out that he's good at flying, and then immediately tries to kind of chase after him.
True.
And it's like, no, he's still a jerk.
Yeah.
Who cares if he's good at flying?
All the stuff he did last night,
Still
he
valid.
Still did. Yeah.
And so you go through a series of scenes. So yeah, she follows him, and then he turns her down. And then the day after that, he's interested in her again, and she's like, no, I don't date students. And it just keeps flipping back and forth.
Wait, is this before she then invites him around?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So the scene ends at this point with her saying, nope, I don't date students. And then the next scene we see with them, he's arriving at her house.
Yep.
What? She just said she doesn't date students, and now he's there.
I actually, you make a good point, but it was actually just after that where I picked up that this film has a weird pace to its narrative. Like, it's like they decided to just cut out big parts to kind of shove it into less than 2 hours. I don't know. But like that scene, for instance, where he goes around to her house, they have the wine, and then he decides that he's going to leave and have to shower somewhere else. And then it goes directly to that scene where he's walking into the elevator, and he's had a shower, and it's like, we know this is like, when you get time to think about it, it's like, oh, it's the next day or it's later, whatever. But the pace of it all is just odd.
I'm not sure if anything is ever really clarified. Like, when he does go to her house, I don't remember her ever inviting him. Does that happen off screen?
I don't remember either. Maybe.
She basically says, I don't date students, and then he leaves volleyball to go to her house.
No, she gives him the note, remember?
Oh, that's right.
The classified note, and then,
Okay, so it's just very strange, because it flips back and forth. But anyway, I apologize. I had to slot some plot points in before we get to that scene where, in front of everyone, she says that he did a reckless move, but also says that it paid off for him.
Yeah.
And he, being the big child that he is, cracks the sads and storms away from her, and she chases after him.
She chases after him in the car, and they get all angry at each other. But like this whole dynamic of like cruise control. Of him being in control of the situation. Like she's chasing him. She wants him, and he is just something to be adored.
Which I just don't get.
No, I do not either.
So, all right, well, we've said that his personality doesn't scream, oh, he's so charming, why don't we love him? So, is it just that it's Tom Cruise? Is it that they try and get...
I love that you're bringing this up now, because I think it's quite important that we make our audience clear of the podcast how much we love Tom Cruise. Just quickly, all right? Because it's not about Tom Cruise, all right? Mr. Brown adores the Mission Impossible films. I do as well, but Mr. Brown's a massive fan of the Mission Impossible films. I could give you a list of a heap of films that I love Tom Cruise in. So it is not Tom Cruise that's the problem. I believe it's his character.
100%. Also, just to clarify, we don't personally know Tom Cruise. So this isn't an appreciation for Tom Cruise, but this is an appreciation for most of Tom Cruise's films.
Love to have you on the podcast, though.
Just give us a buzz.
Yeah.
If it is about Tom Cruise and just being a heartthrob, I did make an interesting note. He doesn't have a lot of the heartthrob type features that he seems to have in later films.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at Tom Cruise, this is a young Tom Cruise. This is a goofy looking Tom Cruise. A lot of sort of superficial celebrity stuff that comes into films later about they have to have this immaculate complexion and they have to be well groomed and all of that doesn't necessarily exist in this film. He's still got his young Tom Cruise buck teeth. He's got a little bit of a monobrow going on in this.
Yep.
And it's interesting because in real life, to varying degrees, people appreciate superficial stuff, but they also really appreciate personality and how nice someone is, how charming they are. But if we're saying that Tom Cruise doesn't actually exhibit any of this charm or good nature throughout the film, then there isn't a whole lot more to rely on than physical attributes. So I found it really interesting that he did have some of these really goofy appearance things throughout the film.
I love that you're pointing out the age, because I actually went into the specifics on this. He's born in 62. So by the time he's filming this in, say, 85, before the 86 release, he's 23 years old. Now, that alone, and I could see it in his face, that's the reason I went and looked it up, because he looked a bit baby-faced still. And I'm thinking, would it be realistic that a 23-year-old gets to become at the top of the top in terms of the military jet fighter pilots? It just didn't seem real to me, and the age of him did not seem realistic to me. going back to some of the other characters outside of Tom, because he makes an early appearance, point out the participation of Michael Ironside. Now, he is an actor who you would know from Scanners, if you know that film, and he's also in Total Recall. He's in a raft of films. I went and looked up his IMDb because I'm like, what films has he been in? And Mr. Brown has reached for the phone on the podcast just to double check, and he's going to do that. Oh, that one and that one and that one.
Yeah.
But exactly I actually want to talk quantity over quality, because he actually has been in 144 feature-length films. Top Gun was his 20th film, but since Top Gun, he has done another 124 films in a 30-year career, and I find that impressive. Starship Troopers as well. What came up then that you were
No, yes. It's more just I mean,
face.
And the idea that he's a real character actor, so someone who you wouldn't see playing a leading man, but he just, as you said, he's in everything, and a bunch of things that you can't even remember he's been in. So
sure.
It is really interesting.
So I just wanted to call him out because I love him, and he does make an appearance in this, even though it's in a small role. Another person who makes an appearance in this in a small role is Meg Ryan, who I think is probably one of my favourites in the film, because I adore her.
She's underutilized, but when she turned up, I did go, oh, thank God.
Yes. So she brings a very Californian kind of vibe to the thing, but I had to look it up. She's actually from Connecticut originally, Meg Ryan, so she's not a Californian.
There you
go. But
Californian.
she's just the energy she brings to the film. She really complements Goose as well. So I think she delivers additional character development to Goose. I do find the scene when they're singing Great Balls of Fire in the cafe or wherever they are, right before Goose dies, spoiler alert, I find that a little bit irritating, in a sense, because I made...
Not due to her.
No, more due to the fact that people think it's okay to do some honky-tonk piano. There's people sitting next to the piano, and if I was them, I'd be like, can you guys keep it down? I know that you think you're cool. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I did love Meg Ryan in the film, though.
Fun fact on the Meg Ryan thing, later on, I noted that a character, when they're having some food, requests, I'll have what she's having.
Yes.
Obviously a very famous line from When Harry Met Sally, which featured Meg Ryan. I love it when actors appear in multiple films and they make reference to other films. I'm sure this was just incidental, but I found that really fun that line came up.
Yeah.
Because she was in the sequence too, so
yes.
It's fun to be able to make those comparisons.
So moving on from that scene where the honky-tonk piano is occurring, it goes straight into the sequence of Goose's death.
Yeah, so this scene, I knew it was coming. I had seen that sequence before, but as I said, I didn't know the context of where it fit in. And then obviously early on in the film when Tom Cruise says, "I'll never let you down," you're like, oh, well, he's going to die. So in the scene, the same thing you were saying before, the pacing is just all over the place.
I wrote that the death of Goose is traumatic, but too fast.
And a bit ambiguous.
Yeah.
They eject and you're kind of like, wait, what's happened to him?
Yeah, if you missed the fact that he ejected into his own cover and understood that's what he killed him, it's like a snap second of visual, right? And yeah, for someone who maybe blinking, it's like, wait, how did he die? Yeah.
Yeah. And they of course reveal that it's not Tom Cruise's fault.
Yeah. So again, Tom is let off the hook, and I actually thought this was an opportunity to add a bit of depth to the story. And even if it wasn't ultimately his fault, they could have maybe hinted that maybe it was. But as we watch the sequence, we know it's not his fault.
Yeah.
There's nothing he does wrong in terms of taking over from Iceman, in terms of gunning down the plane, and then the plane, the jet that they're flying faults in some way, and they have to eject. Nothing that Maverick does indicates it is fault. So he is still flawless to an audience that wants him to be.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't have any consequences for actions, nothing for him to really ponder and to learn from.
He still has the reaction in that courtroom sequence like he's heard that it's
And
his
that
fault,
in itself was confusing.
Because I found myself yelling at the TV, he can't handle the truth. But yeah, you're right, there's no consequence. But the biggest thing throughout the entire film is that pacing issue. And the fact that Goose dies, and then most of the conversations Tom Cruise has in maybe the next couple of days is, I'll get over it, get back in the plane. Like, are you still crying about your friend dying just yesterday? It's so weird. All the like superior officers are like, he needs to get back up there. And then when he does go back up there and isn't in his finest form, they're like, what's going on? He should give up because it's been a few days and he's not back to being perfect.
And obviously, you could see it coming that it's all a very clunky setup to he'll bring it when he needs to bring it, right? So he doesn't even attend the graduation ceremony, or he ends up coming, but like they didn't know whether he's going to come, and he rocks up, and just as he rocks up, coincidentally, they get a critical mission that's handed to him in envelopes. And it's like, Maverick, sir. So he's on board just through saying that, sir. And it's like, the cringe factor was immense. Speaking of cringe, I don't know whether you want to dive into your favourite bits of dialogue through the film.
Yeah.
Tongue-in-cheek by saying favourite?
Well, I do have a top 10 countdown of awful dialogue in the film. I do want to touch on one or two more plot points before we jump into that.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like we're beating a dead horse here in terms of pacing, but with the Maverick-Charlie relationship, when she tells him that she loves him, and they've maybe spent one afternoon together at that point?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what, in terms of total minutes, like, that they've spent together.
The time he went to her house seems to be the only time they've spent alone. Everything else has been at the bar or at work.
That's a good opportunity for me to point out that I feel like Take My Breath Away is arguably a better song than Danger Zone.
So it's this is what I was building to.
I love this song.
Even though the music in the film is fantastic and I loved it, it gets overused so much. I think I counted 4 times for Danger Zone and that Top Gun theme, like that one. But Take My Breath Away happens about, I think it was the 6th time where I was like, oh, now you're just taking the piss.
Oh, I love it so much.
It's like every time they catch a glance at each other, it comes back and take my breath away, and the elevator, and it's like, it's so funny because it happens, they'll say a couple of lines of dialogue, and then it will start up again.
Yep.
And it's just so funny, but
and it's all like audio cues for the audience to know that this is what's happening in this scene. I feel like there was even some piece of score where it's like it's about Goose. Like there was a repetitive piece of music that was like whenever they talked about Goose's death, I think something like that came to mind where they were repeating, and I noticed that as well. But absolutely, these songs were hammered into us so that we all went out and bought the soundtrack on vinyl.
But yeah, so look, I am happy to go into my awful dialogue, my top 10. I know you wanted to do some guesses. While you're thinking about that, can I just put this out there? What's the point of the volleyball scene?
I mean, if you... depends what you want to talk about the director's intent is. Like, if the director's intent is to have great footage of macho life in America. You got to remember, this is mid-80s America, very much the peak of Reagan era, kind of the peak of everything Americana in terms of like machoism. I think that it's just shoehorned in there, just purely for the show reel of, hey, look at these guys being macho. There's also the scene where they're talking with each other in front of the showers and they're all in towels.
But not just in towels, they're all like posed in certain
So Tom
positions.
Cruise has decided he's going to lean up against a pole, and then he moves so that Val Kilmer can then lean up against the pole. And I'm like, it's one thing to all decide to hang out in towels, but another thing to I'm going to take over from the pole so I too can push my chest out. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt very strange to me. I did have a theory that perhaps it was a way to get some more yelping from the male characters into it.
Probably about the
'Cause
yelping.
I hadn't heard enough.
I want to know why Goose didn't go topless. Why did the other three go topless and Goose didn't? Because Goose later goes topless with the towel scene. So why didn't Goose, is that character kind of...
I think he didn't want to showboat.
Yeah, fair. He just didn't want to take anything away from Tom.
That's why Goose is my favourite character, because he didn't take his top off during volleyball. Or say yeehaw once.
That really speaks to the criteria of becoming the favourite character for Mr. Brown in Top Gun. He didn't say yeehaw once.
Nope, he didn't say yeehaw,
There
yo,
it is.
yahoo,
Yep.
He does do an excessive amount of high fives after every single point of volleyball. Which
Well,
I'm
when
not
you
on
feel the
board
need for speed, you do have to give a high five thereafter. Yeah.
with. Oh dear.
Speaking of which, so is that one of your top 10 in terms of let's just be clear, Mr. Brown's cringiest dialogue? Is that what we're calling this?
Yeah, cringy, or just it falls flat, or it's just really cheesy and over the top. No, I feel the need for speed is not in it.
Good, because I actually think that one's a bit of fun.
You might think a lot of these are a bit of fun.
So one that really stood out to me is where at that pivotal moment in the climax where Cruise is deciding whether he's going to do the right or wrong thing, and he's got Goose's dog tags in his hand. Mm-hmm. Talk to me, Goose. Talk to me. Talk to me, Goose. Was that one of them?
No, it wasn't.
For me, that was cringe-tastic.
There's a lot of cringe lines. There are a lot. And there are some lines that just don't make any sense. Another one that's not in my top 10, but just when Goose goes into the motel room and sees Maverick sitting there, and he looks over at him and he just goes, "You still awake?" Yeah, of course he is. He's sitting right in front of you, looking at you. Just pointless lines.
All right. Well, if I hadn't got it with that one, then just reel them off, because I don't know. There must be too many to talk about.
There are a lot, and I did have to cut it down. To be honest, I actually do only have a top 9. I did have a top 10.
Well, let's add Talk to Me Goose into the top 10.
Okay, all right. So that can substitute. My original top 10 one had to be cut just because it was too crude. But I was going to say, as a overall one, anytime that any of the guys refer to their genitals in just a casual manner, that fits in at my top 10.
Yes.
But, all right, at number 9, after he's done the flyby of the Superior and he's really irate and yelling at people, and he yells, "I'll have someone's butt for this. I want some butts." What? Who was in the writer's room? Yeah, that's a good idea. He'll say, "I want some butts."
I'm just going to digress from you reeling out your list, because that Superior is the one who they do the coffee spoof thing.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
So not a spoof, but the ongoing gag where the guy spills his coffee. So going back to the top of our podcast, we talked about comedic moments. That was Tony Scott's attempt to have some comedy throughout the film, and it really falls flat for me. It is just so boring and just really shallow. It's oh, Tom Cruise got it with the coffee again. Yeah, I just did not enjoy that at all, because they do it 3 times over.
Yeah. There's a lot of those things that just don't make sense. Wearing sunglasses inside.
Oh, there's that, absolutely.
Talking while looking out a window instead of looking at the person.
There's too much. Sorry, I disrupted you from your list.
No, you're fine. Coming in at number 8, we had when Charlie isn't giving him a chance, and he says, "If the government trusts me, maybe you could." If that doesn't win her over, I don't know what will.
I love this list already, because I like to pull them out like that, and it's yes, you're absolutely correct. That is terrible writing.
The reason I wanted to do this too is because we've been talking over the last couple of weeks about different formats and maybe different segments for the podcast, and so this was an idea I had about maybe picking your favourite moment and us guessing our own each other's favourite moments. Yep. Doing a top 10 of awful dialogue is another one. So this feels like a good time to bring up. If other people have suggestions of segments you'd like to hear us do,
yes,
then that would be fantastic. If you could let us know, you can comment underneath the video, and we'll try and incorporate that into next week's podcast as well.
Love it.
Alrighty, coming in at number 7, when Val Kilmer says, you're still dangerous, but you can be my wingman anytime.
Right at the end, where they land, and it's like Val Kilmer has even accepted that someone reckless, I still like him. So, are we meant to be on board because Val's on board now?
Yeah, he was the voice of reason the entire film, and now he's just like, nah, bring on the recklessness. When Maverick walks into the bar and sees all the beautiful women around, and he exclaims, now this is what I call a target-rich environment.
I missed that one. That's gross.
It's disgusting. And it's just so stupid. And he says it with this sort of cocky air about him, like, that's good what I just said there, wasn't it?
Target-rich environment.
Just awful. Awful.
Yep.
At number 5, when Slider is laughing at Maverick, and Maverick leans over and you think, oh yeah, this is going to be good. He's going to give him a taste of his own medicine. Get him, Maverick. And he just goes, hey, Slider, you stink.
Oh, that's when the guy is saying that Charlie shut him down, but he didn't really. Yeah.
And it's supposed to be this big oh, got him.
You stink.
You stink.
It's like asking a 4-year-old to retaliate, right? It's what insult can you come up with?
And I mean, he's been acting like a child the entire film, so why should
maybe
this moment be any different?
Yeah.
There's a really passionate scene between Charlie and Maverick, and she goes, take me to bed or lose me forever.
Yep. Yep.
I wish you guys could have been here to see Mr. Whittle's response to that line.
Yep.
He just stared at me stunned.
Yeah.
It's just bad writing. Just bad writing. Alrighty, coming in at number 3, when Charlie says to Maverick, I was afraid everyone would see through me, and I just don't want everyone to know that I've fallen for you.
I love that it's in the top 3 because that's where it deserves to be. It's a worthy contender of being one of the worst lines.
It was a really bad line, but also, as I said, they'd hung out once or twice at this point when she's confessing her love for him. Number 2, in the heartfelt moment when Maverick's superior is trying to talk to him and kind of convince him into staying after the tragic loss of his best friend, and he confidently says, I'm not going to sit here and blow sunshine up your ass. It's like, wow, that's real supportive in this really beautiful moment that you guys are sharing.
Also, that's not a saying to blow sunshine up someone.
You don't use that? I use that all the time. Alrighty, and finally, at number 1, absolute classic line. Son, your ego is writing checks your buddy can't cash.
So it's early on, isn't it?
So early, and
stood out so bad because it just the poor quality of a structure of an analogous kind of thing to bring up is so weird. I'm like, wait, what did he just say? Strickland says that line. By the way, Strickland, we're calling him Strickland. His character's not called Strickland in the film.
I think it is.
Sure it is. Strickland is a reference to his character in a great film called Back to the Future of the actor's name. Anyway, it really stood out as, this is where we're going to be at. It set a precedent for the film in terms of the quality of dialogue we're going to get delivered to us.
Yeah, and look, we've had a lot of fun today just ragging on this film. But I feel like we should, again, just clarify that even though it's not necessarily our kind of film or our favourite film, that's certainly not to dismiss anyone else liking it. I'm sure we'll have a lot of students coming up to us being like, I can't believe you don't like Top Gun. Even just talking to colleagues over the last week when I said, I'm not super keen on watching it, they were like, what? I love Top Gun.
I know, there's so many people that love this film. That's why it's a popular film, because there's so many people that love it. So, we're not in the majority, well, who knows, right? But, there are a lot of people that adore this film, and I'd love to hear their opinions on our opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. And same goes for the last 2 weeks of us talking about Ferris Bueller and The Truman Show. Maybe there's someone out there who's like, you like those movies? Mm-hmm. And would love to hear your feedback on that as well. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to be able to talk about a range of films, and in terms of your own personal preferences. Yeah, we really want to kind of challenge ourselves. We really want to talk about films we haven't seen before, films we like, films we don't like, and just really kind of mix it up each week, which is why we do really encourage people to give us feedback, things that you'd like to hear from us, whether it be about the actual films you want us to talk about, or whether it be the content of those films, so the different segments that I was mentioning before.
Yeah, so we certainly want to guide this podcast in a way where we're talking about things that students want to hear about, but also just a reminder that we do want students to put forward suggestions for the films that we watch as well. So just like, for instance, this week, have we got a couple of suggestions for this upcoming one? I think we've got a few to work with.
Quite possibly, but we're always looking for more.
Correct.
Yeah, and we don't want today's podcast to discourage people from putting their films forward. Whether I enjoyed the film as a whole or not, I really enjoyed watching it as something different, and I really enjoyed talking about it in a different way to how we have the last couple of weeks. So I got just as much out of watching this film as I have the last two that we've done.
I have said since I realised how much of a fan I am about watching films that I will be happy to watch any film at least once. Any film whatsoever. If I like it, then obviously I'm going to watch it more than once. But yeah, I will, if you say to me, can we watch this film, and I haven't seen it before, I will happily sit down and watch it.
For me, I don't think that happens a lot at Film Appreciation Club. I mean, last year, I reckon there was one film that we screened that I hadn't seen before. So that's really exciting for me to watch something that I haven't previously. It allows me to look at something with kind of a fresh take. I mean, most of the stuff that we're talking about, we're coming into it with prior knowledge of the film, so we can kind of do a bit of a deep dive. But I really like talking more surface level, first responses to a film. You can get like a really good indication of just what you think in general, and if you think the film works for you. Whereas if you watch something over and over again, you start to look at it through a different lens.
Sure.
So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I did.
As did I. So I guess we could leave it there.
I will say the obligatory, please do like, subscribe, share it around. We're obviously releasing these on a weekly basis, so that'll help you to stay up to date. If you want to check out any of the other stuff on the channel as well, feel free to do that, and please be commenting and getting in touch to let us know about both that format and films that you'd like us to talk about in future.
We love hearing from students who love film.
Yeah. I had a quote lined up last week. You hit him with a Dankeschön the week before. I don't have anything ready to go for this one. Do you have a fancy quote from Top Gun that sums it all up?
I could have like the best quote for you, but I would be worried that I would take your breath away. So
got him.
Yeah.
Got him good. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks,
we'll catch you
everyone.
next week.